Hello, I'm Jonathan Block. In this video, I'm going to play some fretless bass over a modern digital Mellotron looping soundscape. The signal chain is a Rob Allen short-scale fretless bass with LaBella tapewound strings and the Mellotron M4000D Mini. The outputs from both of these mono instruments goes into a JHS switch pedal, so I can go back and forth between the inputs. The output from the JHS pedal goes into a Boss volume pedal on the floor. The output from the volume pedal goes into a Boss GT1000 Core multi-effects that I'm using for both the bass and the Mellotron. And the stereo output from the Boss GT1000 Core goes into a Boss RE-202 Space Echo that I'm using in long delay mode for the Mellotron looping. The output from the RE-202 goes into a Universal Audio Volt 276 interface that communicates with the iPad Pro. I've got GarageBand here, just using it as like a modern tape recorder. No effects, no anything, just to capture the performance. So I'll essentially be doing bass soloing over some soundscapes. That's really in a nutshell what I'll be doing here. Let me start by demonstrating the sounds that I'll be using on the Mellotron and also what I'll be doing with the GT1000 Core. So as I mentioned, both the bass and the Mellotron will be going through the GT1000 Core. If you've never checked out this multi-effects and you're in the market for one, it's very, very flexible. Particularly for bass and guitar, you have specific bass algorithms and patches, and guitar ones obviously as well, but it also works just as well with keyboards, not just the Mellotron, other synthesizers and other keyboard instruments. So it's really, really a flexible multi-effects. So the sounds that I'm going to be using are primarily from the M400. I'll be using a few choir sounds for the initial part of the soundscape, do some soloing over that. Then I'll come back and create another soundscape using violins and the bass flute. So let's start with the choir sounds. I've got the JHS pedals set for the Mellotron. I'm not actually going to be using a lot of extra effects from the GT1000 Core like I use in other videos. There is compression and reverb on all the time for both the Mellotron and the bass patch. But I'm only going to use one effect on here for one sound, and I'll just turn it on when I get to it. So let's start here. This is 4-voice female choir. You can hear that reverb tail. And then we have the 4-voice male choir. And boys choir. This is where I'll be using one sound from the GT1000 Core, Boss's overtone. They make this as a pedal as well. This is really just to add almost like an octave pedal. So this is with the pedal off and the pedal on. So you get these lower overtones, almost sounds like an organ too. And then for the second part of the soundscape, I'll be using the 3 violins B. So this is similar, really it's just a worse condition tape of the 3 violins that you'll find on the Mark II. So there's a bit more bass on this. A bit more muddy, but you can still hear that reverb. And then the bass flute. So let's switch over. Let me put this back so we're ready for the jamming portion of our program. Let's move over to the bass, so I need to switch the pedal. One of the good things about the JHS pedal as a switcher for 2 inputs to 1 output is as long as the pedal's plugged in, you actually get a LED that changes from blue to red. So red for me denotes the bass, and then blue is the Mellotron. I'll link below. I did a review on this pedal. It really is a nice little pedal, very flexible. So here we go with the bass. Let me turn this to a bass patch that I have. This is the clean bass sound. Again, this is a Rob Allen short scale with the LaBella tapewound strings. That's why they're black. So you can hear That's actually more reverb than I usually would have, but when you're doing stuff like this, you really got to think about the full sonic soundscape. So the Mellotron has a bit more of that reverb on, and when you start layering those sounds, it's really going to sound large. If I then come in there with just a clean bass, no reverb, no anything, it's just going to stick out like a sore thumb. I do want the bass to be a little forward because unlike other videos where I'm just kind of using the bass to add elements to the soundscape, this is actually being the solo instrument. But I, again, want it still to feel part of the same overall soundscape, which is why you're getting that reverb. Very short tail, but reverb nonetheless. I will use the effects on the bass, so I'll use some chorus. The other good thing about this pedal and why it's really, really effective for bass is because you can mix. You can mix the wet and dry signal. I find I enjoy any pedal or any multi-effects on bass. As long as there's a mix knob, you can make it work. Then we have a phaser. And finally, a little bit of delay. So I'll be using the chorus in the first part of the soundscape and then the phaser and the delay together in the second part. All right. That is essentially all of the sounds. What I'd like to do now is just a really short little demonstration of the soundscape with the Mellotron and the RE-202. So I'll have a link down below to a video where I really go in depth about how to use the RE-202 as a looper. So you need to get it into long delay mode. You can get up to 6 seconds of tap delay. My tip is always, and again, all of this information is in both the video I have, and then there's a link to the manual, the online manual for this unit in that video description as well. But it's much easier to just tap a 2-second delay and then you change the head and you get 6 seconds. So let me just lay down a few of the sounds. Again, we're not going to be using a lot of effects, just the overtone with the boys choir, and then it's really just the compression and the reverb that's always on. So let me just do a little loop here, few sounds here and there from the choirs, and then we'll put some bass soloing over that. Good point here. So I did not switch the switch. So now the blue light's on. Even with the lights, I still forget to do that. I'm also going to point out something else I forget to do it, and if I actually do it, I'm going to leave it in the video. I constantly forget to turn off the looping when I'm doing the soloing. And then I get bass in the loop too, which is not what I'm looking for. So, all right, let's try this again. A little bit of Mellotron choir looping. So this loop and this whole jam will be in D major. So we've got 3 sounds from the female choir. Let's add in some sounds from the male choir. Just stop for a second there so you can hear the way they interact. So no matter where you set the repeats, it begins to degrade and the volume goes down on that first pass. So this is not meant to be a looper. It's not marketed as a looper. I don't really know anyone else using this as a looper at this point. So you gotta like that degradation. The sound is already going down. You can hear what happens is like the bass and the treble start to quickly fall away and you get this woody mid-range sound. Because essentially we now have 6 notes going, they all start to interact as well. Now I'm gonna add one more layer. That's the boys choir. This is where I'll turn on the overtone effect because I essentially adding a low pedal D here. And okay, another 3 notes. And now with this going, I'll do a little solo over that. And then we can hear how that loop has changed. You can hear already. Those original sounds are fading into the background. The boys' choir, manipulated as it is with the overtone, is the dominant sound right now. So I need to switch this over to the bass. I will turn that off now. And start just with the, well, that's the Mellotron patch. I need to get to the bass patch. We'll do some chorus here. And then later on in the soundscape, I'll be using the phaser and the delay. So a lot more bassier sound. And I do actually have a high pass filter set at, I believe it's 70 hertz. So it's filtering out all the lows below 70 hertz, but it's still really bassy. Have EQ'd a bit of it out though in the patch too. So you can hear that Mellotron soundscape, how the sounds have changed. So really the choir sounds, other than the boys' choir, that's that louder sound on top, has kind of all melted together and it's just this one almost continuous sound. That's the cool thing about this pedal. You can control what you put in. Once you learn it, you can kind of start figuring out how sounds will interact. But it's really about letting it run a little while and then that interaction of those sounds, creating almost different sounds. You get some synthy, some organy type in there as well. So I'm just going to turn down that all the way so this loop stops. Let me reset these, and at this point, let's just get right into the improv. I will link below. I did this in improv with this setup a few nights ago, so it's in the dark with flashing lights and all that stuff we all love so much about these pieces of gear. So this one will be a little shorter than that. Let me reset this back up. Let's turn on the loop here. Got everything set the way I need to. Whoops, that was the volume, which we don't want to change. I need just to go back to that Mellotron patch. We're all set here. All right, let's try this out. that going. So you can hear it's fading in the background. I have this set right now at about 1 o'clock because I did want it to fade. About 1:30, 2 o'clock on the repeats knob will give you the least amount of sound degradation and volume, i.e. it'll happen as slow as it can, but there's no way to stop it. This is not a traditional looper. If you're looking to make a riff or something that doesn't decay and the sound is completely pristine, just buy a traditional looper, because this won't get you there. But you can hear the way everything is kind of that woody, mid-rangey sound, and how everything is kind of blending together. And then you can really do any instrument soloing over it. I just happened to use the fretless bass this time. A lot of times when I'm doing the Soundscape on the Mellotron, I've been using a lot of different effects, but with the choirs, and particularly, you can also get these interesting sounds really without using many effects at all. Again, I was just using the overtone. No, actually on this bit that we're really hearing, I did not use any effects other than the compression and the reverb. But the violins and the flute don't really necessarily sound like violins and flutes anymore. Thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and good luck with your own music.